this is a certain question for this premiere video. It's not saying that I know it all and I'm an expert at everything. It's following up on the process of things and how different mechanisms function in a way that is slower than fast or faster than slow. So the particular inquiry here is when quote-unquote building community and building interactions and building rapport with just the nearby neighboring species of Earth, because we're all neighbors to each other on Earth, we would have to ask eventually, within some type of intellectual maturity, we would have to ask, how does like two people of the opposite gender simply get to know each other non-sexually? I'm not saying something of a sex nature can't happen. Do you know where 24-hour fitness is? Okay, is that where you're going?
No, but it's basically just all along this guy.
Oh, okay, thank you, man. Okay. So when a guy sees a girl and a girl sees a guy, there's kind of like this default reaction the human has. But it's not just that, you know, because throughout our life, as we're getting stretched throughout our life, when we're becoming 0 all the way to like, you know, something of like a grandpa age, 77. I don't know why that number came out. But when reaching somewhere around the age of 77, we eventually realize that life is more than just sex, you know. I'm not disregarding sex. I'm not sharing an opinion on sex. I'm not giving any of my thoughts on sex. I'm just recognizing it for what it is in the community of Earth and the different cultures of Earth and how it's low-key used in a multitude of different various ways, obviously. And not even speaking the piece on that. I'm just saying the possibility of it. When we meet a girl, if we have like, because the sexual energies, how they're balanced, it's not just like human physical urges. We have to have some like low key, without us really realizing it, we have to have like the spiritual purpose. It is like an underground wire throughout our lives. And that underground wire throughout our lives, even when we're non-sexual, there's like some energy still pulling us that's like sexual, but it's in a different mode, and it's more kind of dormant, right? There's like a dormancy within it. So like when we're living out our lives, it's not like our whole lives isn't like all the time sexual, even though we could like, for whatever phases of our life we came out of that, we have like this natural default urge to like kind of procreate, understandable. And within our approach to procreation, we have to follow different cultural guidelines and how it's kind of appropriated within families, different diverse families, within nations, all the way within those nations sharing other nations on one planet Earth, the great experiment. So it's how we're approaching our preparation, and how the preparation and the approach is it's its own path to seeing how we have to do a particular balance to kind of, if we want to like get quote unquote sexual end quote, and this is not about like this is not a video about sexuality per se, but it's just an intuitive thing. If we would want to like have some type of like sexuality within our lives, then we would have to balance the relationships of the family we came from and the family we came from. They're under a certain quote unquote intellectual guise, end quote, where they're following like some type of government system that has certain laws per the nation, and their micro family within the government. That's two things we have to follow up on that like collective nationwide mind. So if we're not on par with those tasks of that mechanism within the government system, within this passing age, the dark age to the lesser dark age, the four yugas, you know, casually like seen in a different way, go to a last video, then we if we don't follow those cultural, like, you know, society constructs, then that's something we have to work on per that mechanism that takes us out of, quote unquote, the sexuality field, end quote, which is not good, not bad. There are other works that are needing to be done. I'm not like, throughout life, sexuality or like, you know, having an intimate life, it's not necessarily everything, but it's a big part. You could say it's like a big 44% or something like that to 66%, right? Because we're going in and out of like, of how we have to find ourselves per this 3D matrix, and how we have to find ourselves per this 3D matrix, the sexual activities, interactions in a balanced field, in an orderly field of esoteric principles, they come to a like a slowing down of a wave. The wave kind of like passes, you know, because like we're like, if you're a 3D human Earth, we have to work, you know, we have to work for our family, we have to work for our nation. Just saying that neutrally though, you know. So as we're doing that, we eventually throughout our lives, from 0 to 10, 20, 30, 40 years old, 50 years old, etc., we eventually balance our like our intellectual sexual energies with our sexual energies. The intellectual sexual energies, what do we have to do? What do we have to uphold as tasks as far as the society, you know? We have to somehow like balance the family karma, and how the family somehow at a default level has like, you know, just like, you know, casual connections to you, and eventually things are going to get transformed. We don't realize how things are going to get transformed, you know. Everything that's even embarrassing, you know, there's still a transformer element behind that, you know. Pluto don't really play, like, because like no matter what, like this is like, we don't understand what death is. It's transformation at like every corner. That's what death is. And we're not necessarily honoring and recognizing that being its own division and energy agency on its own, you know, and it intertwines with all the other agencies. Like Pluto connects to like the Mercury and the Saturn, you know, like indefinitely, you know. So this video was about like seeing like, as we grow within our particular maturation, we have to balance our sexual approach. What does that mean? Balance our sexual approach. Well, within the casual general laws of just the society and the nation and the cultures that are in, you know, the cities and all the different families that are somehow like a unique, you know, politic system within the cities and the nations. They're kind of like, we're moving within how, like, what is preferred for their, like, you know, their kind, but we're not recognizing that the spiritual diversity, that's the first thing, you know. That's the thing that we're catering to, because ultimately laws are created by how people or conscious beings or celestial beings, how they function, you know, how they function. If it's hot outside, then you might need like some type of air conditioner, and to install the air conditioner to combat this region of heat, is it really warranted for this demographic of people per what they are as a species? Because there's infinite species, obviously, original open source to it all. So like this video is about, is like recognizing the sexual approach and seeing eventually maybe we might have our own unique marital arrangement, quote unquote sexual arrangement, end quote. Different organizations and cultures, no judgment, some of them have more than one wife, but for them to get to that metaphysical status, that they are appointed to some significant degree by nature to do that, you know, no judgment. But that doesn't negate the fact that they still have to follow up on some type of nationwide esoteric law, you know, of just general guidelines and principles on what is appropriate per the diversity spiritually and per the diversity in the surface level human realm, you know. So that's how the laws are created. And I'm just saying it generally, you know, how laws are created. Balancing the sexual approach. You know, as we're riding the wave of our life isn't all about like, you know, in the downtime when we have to kind of like weave and thread our physical material tasks to some type of like original God task, then that wave goes up and down out of sexuality and in it and out of it. So within that, so like in this, pretty much what I'm trying to say is, in the surface level reality of society, eventually you have to like kind of like be aware and balanced to the appropriation of like the diversities of quote unquote sexual natures, end quote, to just being nature, because the being nature, it isn't necessarily quote unquote like sexual, because it's like something that's transcended the sexual nature. It's the beingness. So within the beingness, that beingness is always there, you know, and that doesn't necessarily have to be identified as sexual. So within the beingness, within, as you're riding within your own spaceship and your own waves upon other people's differentiated spaceships and waves, which are not you, a modern neti, what's really going on is, and I just saw a license plate, I love RSX. So that's kind of, so the mind is like, it's just one, it's one thing, right? Or whatever. So the beingness, eventually within some type of individual spiritual intelligence and individual spiritual awareness, etc., within that individual spiritual awareness, you're gonna have to do the checks and balances within your own energy to see how you could just be and interact with other beings without being sexual. And this is a mature esoteric conversation, mind you. If you're like kind of like, you know, kind of like rudimentary to all these like concepts, then I suggest you tune off, because you might just like do more damage to yourself than where you're at, because you might not be ready for this transmission. But obviously all the disclaimers are in effect here, because the disclaimers are saying the entertainment is doing what it's doing in a fictional way, as we're being influenced for us to receive that cultural media, and that cultural media keeps doing its thing and it's influencing us per that directive, and we're just doing what their entertainment media, you know, factions are doing, as however they're advertising their energies and their concepts and their agendas low key. So that's one disclaimer. All of my content is for a particular type of entertainment that's not necessarily nonfiction, and it's just kind of like matching and following up what the general collective media is already doing as far as what they're promoting as their energies, you know, agendas and kind of narratives, and like whatever representations come with that, however fucking played out, stale, and, you know, nonchalant, like no talent that they have, you know, and they have like ghostwriters and shit. It's like, it's just recognizing like how they're doing it, pretty much. So that's a particular disclaimer. Is like, there's like some type of mirror principle going on, and you know, the certain level of beingness, that will esoterically, intellectually go into your life eventually, you know. Who knows? And it could happen any age. It's not ageist, you know. Anybody could receive this wisdom. A 12-year-old, regardless of like, you know, it's not about being racist or speciesist. It's about seeing the anomaly, do the works for the other anomalies, because at the end of the day, we could ask, how do we? So this is how I wanted to open up this video. Like, I'll just give like, you know, a new summary after a topic, concept or whatever, and I won't mention the concept till after, you know, for whatever reason. And the original topic that I wanted to actually cover before this, you know, intuitive summary was digressed was how do we build maturely and appropriately with the opposite gender without, quote unquote, parentheses, not necessarily, end quote, parentheses, like having to do anything, you know? Well, obviously seeing the possibility that remains. So seeing the possibility that remains, because obviously here it is right here, like eventually within your esoteric maturity energetics, or whatever, your esoteric maturity energetics, eventually there will be a point where you could really just be. You know how they say in the New Age teachings, just be? It's not just that, you know. I recognize that lack of critical thinking a long time ago, like, and how you want a balanced approach to like your fallacies of your fragmented truth, be it whatever New Age truth. There's still some measure of fragmentation and inaccuracy and falseness, and if you can't see that within your own New Age truth, that's your lack of critical intelligence. But to really just be, you have to work for that too, you know? There's things that are moving within the material matrix as their own function mechanisms of their own wave formats, and the wave format not always being fluid, liquid, ethereal, solid, it being gaseous, it being, you know, even more so like flammabaceous, or even like something of like a vortexual, you know, something of a different elemental wave. It's not just one thing, you know. It's not just be, say that incomplete truth and make a bunch of money on a fragmented truth and be like a false representation mentally and physically. It's not that bullshit. Because like, if you're not like concerned with how the New Age leaders could like give you false information and even lie to you, and if that doesn't kind of raise an eyebrow for you, then then the intellectual maturity isn't like there to know what to fight for, you know. Or like, you know, so it's beyond all these like webinars that are just like mining and searching and just like kind of like, not like, just to be like frank, you know, I don't really see the purpose, you know, other than just like them being in their basic human mindset and just doing it for quote unquote money, end quote. And money is like, it's just a form of trade. It's just it's a paper that barters for you. And I don't got anything against money. I'm just saying, like, it's not just about the money, you know? But how people could just focus only on money, that's a unique illusion, you know? It's a unique illusion to focus only on money. So let's see, guys. So the beginning of this video, the main point I wanted to say was like, the main points that were already covered were, you know, like eventually, like you could ask within your mature life, disclaimers in effect, you know, you're coming to listen at your own, you know, leisure and your own energetic efforts. So the responsibilities, whatever you take back is yours. The responsibility comes with, you know, whatever the responsibility is ultimately overseeing. But eventually throughout one's life, they you could ask, how could I relate and interact to the opposite gender without having to be like, you know, sexual, you know, just trying to build. And that's how the laws are kind of like built around, you know. It's like some type of appropriation for the diversity in the human realm. The human realm diversity, we're recognizing that, seeing the appropriations of how they function on an advanced level perhaps, And then we're seeing how there's a possibility for both of the opposite genders that could just be, you know, they could just be in their own ways. And as they're being in their own ways, it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. It's recognizing the spiritual purpose of the community builds and balancing the esoteric intellectual energies and physical energies, so you could just be with, in an appropriate manner, with the opposite gender, but actually do like work on a build project. Like, so how do you like work with the opposite gender without having to quote unquote be sexual, end quote, and just build on a project, you know? That was the main introduction topic of this video. Swallow it. The spit is I think that's like a qigong thing. They really do that in qigong. They swallow their spit so they could retain some type of qi reserve from the channel that's ultimately accumulating, you know, the reserves of the thymus gland and the thyroid. Thank you guys. Let's see, I'm at 21 minutes and 17 seconds. 17 is a... 1-7. So the main question to this video was, like, I wanted to say it in a casual way. I don't want to be like too like oh, like people are trying to be, you know, quote unquote, you know, scandeezy or fallacious or scandalous. You know, I'm not trying to like, end quote, I'm not trying to like say it like that, you know, because obviously, like, you know, everyone's a different like spirit within spirits, you know, like a bunch of different spirits, and we have names for these spirits, you know, per the Eastern traditions. The Eastern traditions, not just one, many of the Eastern traditions, they have names for these type of archetypes that came from us from like different lives. And it's up to us to kind of balance those spirits within ourselves. And we're new to the Eastern traditions of how they're looking at it, and how how the Eastern tradition knowledge, it's coming freshly always. It's coming freshly always to the Western tradition. Like the Western tradition, it's always learning, but we're not necessarily new to the Eastern tradition. Oh my gosh, this is right here. That's right here. So we're not necessarily new to the Eastern tradition. My bad. So like we've been working with the Eastern traditions for a while. And as we've been working with the Eastern traditions, it's simultaneously new, and it's simultaneously like we've been working with it, you know? And as we've been like working with that tradition, it's still new to us though. And the newness, it's like, that's the new knowledge, the quote unquote new knowledge to us. That's the shit that's fresh to us, you know? It's fresh to us because we're barely finding out about it. And we're seeing the different track record. We're seeing the different track record of how we've been using it, you know? Because obviously, and this is what everyone's low-key concern is, but like, you know, the intelligence didn't necessarily process it, but they know it, you know? There's some instinct like, you know, is my family gonna be safe? Is my like, is like my, like pretty much is like, you know, is my like, yeah, that's pretty much the word for all of it, you know? Is my family gonna be safe when they enter this type of scenario? So this is like the essence of like appropriation, you know? And we are not necessarily energetically voting for that because we're in different, you know, genetic groupings that have their own agenda that's not necessarily for balanced intelligence. Just saying it as blunt as you can. Let me see, I'm at 25 minutes. Jeez. So, eventually, I'm gonna go in there. I'm gonna go in there, guys. I'm gonna go in there. So eventually, whoa. So eventually, the beginning of this video, I just wanted